They threw me away like trash, the unwanted daughter no one bothered to love. My own father shoved me into a wagon meant for my beautiful sister, laughing as he sold me off to a stranger. When the rancher saw my face instead of hers, his eyes went cold with disgust. Everyone expected me to break, to run, to disappear like I'd never mattered at all. But here's what they didn't know. The woman they discarded was about to become someone they'd never forget. If you want to see how this story ends, stay until the final word. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this journey travels. The wagon lurched over another rut in the dirt road, and Evelyn Mercer's stomach twisted with it. She gripped the splintered wooden seat, knuckles white, trying not to vomit. Not from the motion, though that didn't help, but from the sick realization of what had just happened. 20 minutes ago, she'd been standing in her father's dusty parlor, watching her sister Celeste preen in front of the cracked mirror. Celeste, with her golden hair pinned up in careful curls, her dress the nicest thing their family owned, pale blue cotton that made her eyes look like summer sky. Their father had been pacing, smoking his pipe, talking about the arrangement he'd made with some rancher out west. A marriage contract, good money, a better life for his daughter. Evelyn had been happy for Celeste, relieved even. At 24, she was 3 years older than her sister and had long since accepted that marriage wasn't in her future. She was too plain, too quiet, too forgettable. Celeste was the one people noticed when they walked into a room. Celeste was the one their father showed off like a prize mare. So when the wagon had pulled up outside, a sturdy thing pulled by 2 horses, driven by a weathered man who barely looked at either of them, Evelyn had stepped back to let her sister have her moment. That's when her father's hand had clamped around her arm. "Get in," he'd said. She'd laughed, actually laughed, because surely he was joking. "Papa, the wagon's for Celeste. I said get in." His fingers had dug into her flesh hard enough to bruise. Dalton paid for a bride. He's getting one. The room had spun. But Celeste is too valuable to waste on some rancher. He'd shoved her toward the door. You, on the other hand. She'd looked at her sister then, waiting for Celeste to say something, anything, to tell their father this was insane. Celeste had simply adjusted her hair in the mirror and smiled. "Have a nice trip, Evie." The driver, a man named Jeremiah who spoke in grunts and half-sentences, hadn't asked questions when Evelyn stumbled into the wagon instead of the golden-haired beauty he'd clearly been expecting. Maybe he'd seen this kind of thing before. Maybe he just didn't care. Now, 3 hours into a journey that would take 2 days, Evelyn sat rigid on the bench, her own dress, brown, practical, worn at the hem, already covered in road dust. She had no trunk, no belongings except what she'd been wearing. Her father hadn't even given her time to pack. "You know where we're headed?" Jeremiah asked suddenly. First words he'd spoken since they'd left town. "Black Hollow Ranch," Evelyn said quietly. "That's all I know. Rhett Dalton's place." Jeremiah spat over the side of the wagon. "Big operation. Lot of cattle. Even more land." "What's he like?" Jeremiah was quiet for a long moment. "Hard man. Fair, I suppose. Doesn't suffer fools. And he's expecting—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "He's expecting what he paid for." Jeremiah glanced at her sideways. "Your pa showed him a photograph. Said his daughter was the prettiest thing in 3 counties. Of course he had. A photograph of Celeste. Evelyn's hands started shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, willing them to stop. "What happens when we get there and he sees I'm not her?" Jeremiah shrugged. "That's between you and him, miss. I just drive the wagon." The sun beat down mercilessly as they traveled west. The landscape changed from the familiar rolling hills of home to something flatter, harsher. Endless plains stretched in every direction, broken only by occasional clusters of scrub brush and the distant shapes of cattle. They stopped once to water the horses at a creek that was barely more than a trickle. Evelyn climbed down on shaking legs, her whole body aching from the constant jostling. She knelt by the water, cupped some in her hands, drank. It tasted like minerals and earth. "We'll camp here tonight," Jeremiah said. "Reach Black Hollow by tomorrow afternoon." He built a small fire as the sun set, cooked beans in a dented pot, handed her a tin plate without ceremony. Evelyn ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Around them, the plains went dark and vast, punctuated by stars so bright and numerous they seemed unreal. "You could run," Jeremiah said into the silence. Evelyn looked up, startled. I wouldn't stop you. He poked at the fire with a stick. Long walk back to anywhere, but you could try. For a moment she actually considered it, just standing up, walking into that darkness, disappearing. But where would she go? Back to a father who'd sold her like livestock. To a town where everyone would know she'd run from a marriage contract, making her even more unmarriageable than before. No, she said finally. I'll see it through. Jeremiah nodded, unsurprised. Get some sleep then. Long day tomorrow. She lay on the hard ground, wrapped in a thin blanket he'd tossed her, staring up at those impossible stars. Somewhere out there, Celeste was probably sleeping in her own bed, dreaming about whatever future their father had planned for her instead. A better future. An easier one. Evelyn had spent her whole life being the spare daughter, the backup plan, the one who faded into the background while Celeste sparkled. Now she was being handed off to a stranger who'd paid good money for something she wasn't. She should cry, should feel something other than this hollow numbness. Instead, she just felt tired. When she finally slept, she dreamed of her mother, dead 6 years now from fever. In the dream, her mother was braiding her hair like she used to when Evelyn was small. You're stronger than you know, Dream Mother whispered. Evelyn woke with tears on her face and no idea why. Oh, the next day passed in a blur of heat and dust and silence. Jeremiah didn't try to make conversation, and Evelyn was grateful. She watched the landscape roll by, trying not to think about what waited at the end of this journey. Black Hollow Ranch appeared on the horizon just after 2 in the afternoon. It was bigger than Evelyn had imagined. A main house, 2 stories, painted white but weathered by sun and wind to a grayish color, sat at the center of a sprawling complex. Barns, corrals, outbuildings scattered around it. Cattle dotted the distant fields in dark clusters. Men moved between the buildings, working. The whole place hummed with activity. As the wagon rolled closer, some of the men stopped working to watch. Their faces were curious, assessing. That's the boss's house, Jeremiah said, nodding toward the main building. Evelyn's throat went dry. The wagon pulled to a stop in front of the house. Jeremiah climbed down, and after a moment, Evelyn forced herself to follow. Her legs wobbled as her feet hit the ground. The front door opened. Rhett Dalton stepped out onto the porch, and Evelyn's first thought was that he looked exactly like what a rancher should look like. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing work clothes that had seen actual work. Dark hair, darker eyes, a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so hard. Maybe 35, maybe older. Sun-weathered and serious. He looked at the wagon, at Jeremiah. Then his gaze landed on Evelyn. His expression didn't change exactly, but something shifted. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. This is her? His voice was deep, flat. This is the woman your bride price paid for, Jeremiah said carefully. William Mercer's daughter. I was shown a photograph of William Mercer's daughter. Rhett came down the porch steps slowly, each footfall deliberate. That woman had blonde hair and blue eyes. That would be Celeste, Evelyn said, before she could stop herself. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. My sister. Rhett stopped a few feet away, looking down at her. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the set of his mouth. This was not a man who smiled often. Your sister, he repeated. Yes. And where is she? Home. With my father. Evelyn met his gaze even though everything in her wanted to look away. He changed his mind about the arrangement, decided to send me instead. A muscle jumped in Rhett's jaw. Did he? It wasn't a question. One of the ranch hands, a younger man with red hair, had drifted closer, clearly listening. Others were watching from various distances, pretending to work, but obviously interested in this development. Rhett seemed to notice. His expression hardened further, if that was possible. Thomas, he called out, not taking his eyes off Evelyn. Show Miss Mercer to the upstairs guest room. The guest room? Thomas sounded confused. Boss, I thought... The guest room, Rhett repeated, his voice like iron. Then to Jeremiah. You'll stay the night. Leave in the morning. He turned and walked back into the house without another word. Evelyn stood there, cheeks burning, as Thomas approached awkwardly. He was maybe 20, with kind eyes that kept darting between her and the house. "This way, miss," he said quietly. She followed him inside, aware of every pair of eyes tracking her movement. The house was neat but sparse, functional rather than decorated. Dark wood floors, simple furniture. It smelled like leather and coffee and wood smoke. Thomas led her up a narrow staircase to the second floor, down a short hallway, and opened a door to a small room. A bed, a washstand, a window overlooking the front yard. I'll bring up some water," Thomas said. "In case you want to wash up, supper's at 6, in the kitchen." "Thank you." He nodded and fled, clearly relieved to escape the awkwardness. Evelyn closed the door and leaned against it, finally alone. The guest room. Not a wife's room, not even a room that suggested permanence. She walked to the window, looked out at the ranch spread below. Men were still working, though a few kept glancing toward the house. Talking. Probably about her. The wrong sister, the unwanted bride. She'd known this would be bad, had prepared herself for disappointment on Rhett Dalton's part, but she hadn't quite prepared for the humiliation of being treated like a problem to be dealt with later. Like a piece of furniture delivered to the wrong address. There was a knock at the door. Thomas returned with a pitcher of water and a basin, set them on the washstand without meeting her eyes. "Boss says you should rest," he mumbled. "Been a long trip and all." "Thank you, Thomas." He hesitated at the door. "Miss, if you don't mind my saying, this ain't your fault. Whatever happened back home, I mean, it ain't your fault." The unexpected kindness nearly broke her. "I appreciate that," she managed. After he left, she poured water into the basin, washed her face and hands. The water turned brown with road dust. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand. Brown hair coming loose from its pins, brown eyes too big in a pale face. A dress that had never been pretty to begin with. Not blonde, not blue-eyed, not Celeste. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap, and tried to figure out what she was supposed to do now. Artish seat. She didn't go down for supper, partly because she couldn't face Rhett Dalton and whatever cold disappointment would be in his eyes. Partly because she genuinely wasn't hungry. Her stomach was twisted in knots. But mostly because she didn't know what her role was supposed to be here. Wife? Guest? Unwanted burden? As the sun set, she heard voices from downstairs. Men talking, laughing, the sounds of a household settling in for the evening. Eventually, the house went quiet. Evelyn lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. The room was cold despite the day's heat. Or maybe she was just cold from the inside out. Somewhere around midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway. They paused outside her door. She held her breath, waiting. After a long moment, the footsteps moved away. She exhaled shakily and rolled onto her side, pulling the thin blanket around her shoulders. This was her life now. This room, this ranch, this man who looked at her like a mistake he hadn't ordered. Her father had thrown her away. Celeste hadn't even tried to stop him, and now she was here, hundreds of miles from anything familiar, with a stranger who'd paid for someone else entirely. The smart thing would be to cry, to let out all the fear and humiliation and grief. But Evelyn had learned a long time ago that crying didn't change anything, didn't make people love you, didn't make you matter. So instead, she lay in the dark and made herself a promise. Whatever this place demanded of her, she would give it. Whatever she had to do to earn her keep, she would do it. She wouldn't break, wouldn't run, wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of watching her fail. If this brutal land wanted to crush her, she would survive it instead, even if surviving was all she had left. Morning came too early. Evelyn woke to pale sunlight streaming through the window and the sounds of the ranch already in full swing, men calling to each other, horses whinnying, the general noise of work beginning. She sat up slowly, every muscle aching from yesterday's wagon ride and a night spent rigid with anxiety. Her dress was wrinkled beyond redemption. Her hair was a disaster. There was a soft knock at the door. "Miss Mercer?" A woman's voice, older. "I brought you some things." Evelyn opened the door to find a gray-haired woman holding a bundle of clothing. She had a weathered face and sharp eyes that assessed Evelyn quickly. "I'm Martha," the woman said. "I cook and keep house here. Mr. Dalton thought you might need these." She thrust the bundle forward. "They belonged to his mother. She passed some years back, but she was about your size." "Thank you." Evelyn took the clothes, surprised by the gesture. Martha's expression softened slightly. There's breakfast in the kitchen if you're hungry. Might want to get down there soon. The men eat fast and don't leave much behind. She turned to go, then paused. Miss, I don't know what happened to land you here instead of whoever was supposed to come. But Mr. Dalton's a hard man, not a cruel one. Give him time to figure out what to do about all this. What to do about me, you mean? Martha's mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. Get dressed. Come eat. Rest can sort itself out. After she left, Evelyn examined the clothing. A simple gray dress, some undergarments, a shawl. All practical, well made, worn but clean. She changed quickly, grateful to be out of yesterday's dusty clothes. The dress fit reasonably well, though it was loose in the shoulders. She found the kitchen by following the smell of coffee and bacon. It was a large room dominated by a massive stove and a long wooden table. Several ranch hands were scattered around it, shoveling food into their mouths and talking around mouthfuls. They fell silent when she appeared in the doorway. Don't mind them, Martha said from the stove. They ain't never seen a woman eat before. She shot the men a look. Show some manners or get out. The men returned to their food, but Evelyn could feel their curiosity like a physical thing as she sat at the end of the table. Martha brought her a plate, eggs, bacon, biscuits, and a cup of black coffee. Thank you, Evelyn said quietly. She ate because she needed to, not because she tasted anything. The men finished quickly and filed out, some nodding to her awkwardly on their way past. Thomas was the last to leave. He paused by her chair. Boss wants to see you, in his office, when you're done eating. Her stomach dropped. Where's his office? First door on the left past the stairs. After he left, Martha refilled her coffee cup without being asked. Eat up, girl. Whatever's coming, you'll handle it better on a full stomach. Evelyn forced down the rest of her breakfast, then followed Martha's directions to Rhett's office. She knocked on the closed door. Come in. The office was small and masculine. A desk covered in ledgers and papers, shelves lined with books, a window overlooking the corrals. Rhett sat behind the desk reading something. He looked up when she entered, gestured to the chair across from him. Sit. She sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. Rhett set down whatever he'd been reading and regarded her with those dark, unreadable eyes. In the morning light, she could see he hadn't slept well either. There were shadows under his eyes. I sent Jeremiah back with a letter for your father, he said without preamble, explaining that I paid for a specific woman and received a different one, demanding either a full refund or that the correct bride be sent. Evelyn's throat tightened. I see. It'll take several days for him to return with a response. Rhett leaned back in his chair. Until then, you'll stay here as a guest. A guest? You're not a prisoner. You're free to move about the ranch, but you're also not... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. You're not my wife. The contract was specific. I don't have a wife until the terms are met. I understand. Do you? His gaze sharpened. Because from where I'm sitting, your father committed fraud. Took my money under false pretenses and sent someone else entirely. Someone else. Not even worth naming. Evelyn lifted her chin. You're right. What my father did was wrong. But I didn't have a choice in this either, Mr. Dalton. Didn't you? He tilted his head slightly. You could have refused, told Jeremiah there was a mistake. And what would that have accomplished? My father would have forced me into the wagon anyway. Or worse. She met his gaze steadily. I'm here because the alternative was worse. Not because I'm trying to deceive you. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. As if he hadn't expected her to push back. Fair enough, he said after a moment. But that doesn't change the situation. I paid for a bride. A specific bride based on representations your father made. You're not what I bought. The words stung even though they were true. No, she agreed quietly. I'm not. Silence stretched between them. Outside, someone was shouting instructions about moving cattle to the north pasture. What happens if my father refuses to send Celeste? Evelyn asked. Or return your money? Rhett's expression hardened. Then I'll have some decisions to make. Such as? Such as whether I send you back or keep you here as something else. Something else? She repeated. Like a servant? Like whatever works. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. This is a working ranch, Miss Mercer. Everyone here earns their keep. If you stay, in whatever capacity, you'll do the same. I never expected otherwise. He glanced back at her. You know how to work? I can cook, clean, mend, tend animals. She'd done all of it growing up, while Celeste practiced her piano and perfected her embroidery. I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Dalton. We'll see. He turned back to the window. For now, help Martha in the kitchen. Make yourself useful. We'll figure out the rest when Jeremiah returns. It was clearly a dismissal. Evelyn stood, smoothing the borrowed dress. Mr. Dalton? What? I'm sorry this isn't what you wanted. Truly. He didn't respond, just kept staring out the window, jaw tight. She left the office and closed the door quietly behind her. Ching. The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm. Evelyn worked. Martha seemed grateful for the help and taught her the routines of the ranch kitchen, cooking for a dozen hungry men 3 times a day, managing supplies, keeping everything clean and organized. The work was endless and exhausting, but Evelyn threw herself into it, partly because it kept her busy, partly because she needed to prove she wasn't useless. The ranch hands gradually grew accustomed to her presence. Thomas remained kind, often going out of his way to carry heavy things for her or offer quiet words of encouragement. The others were more reserved, but not hostile. They seemed to be waiting, like everyone else, to see what would happen when Jeremiah returned. Rhett, meanwhile, avoided her almost completely. She saw him at meals, where he sat at the head of the table and ate in silence while the men talked around him. She saw him crossing the yard, moving between buildings, working alongside his men. He was everywhere and nowhere, always busy, never looking directly at her. It was as if she didn't exist, which maybe was easier than the alternative. On the 4th day, Evelyn was hauling water from the well when one of the horses in the nearby corral started acting up, a young mare, bucking and snorting, clearly spooked by something. Easy, girl, one of the hands was saying, trying to calm her. Easy now. Evelyn set down her buckets and moved closer to the fence. The mare's eyes were rolling white, her whole body tense. She stepped on something, Evelyn said, watching the way the horse favored her left front hoof. She's hurt. The hand, a stocky man named Pete, glanced at her in surprise. How can you tell? Look at how she's standing, all her weight on 3 legs. Evelyn kept her voice soft. She needs that hoof checked. Pete frowned but climbed into the corral, approaching the mare carefully. It took several minutes and some creative maneuvering, but he finally managed to lift the hoof in question. I'll be damned, he muttered. There's a stone wedged in here. He removed it, and the mare immediately calmed, shaking her head but no longer panicking. Pete looked at Evelyn with new respect. You know horses, miss? A little. We had some back home, before her father had sold most of them to pay his gambling debts. Might mention that to the boss, Pete said. We've got a few animals that could use someone with a gentle hand. But Evelyn didn't mention it to Rhett, didn't want to seem like she was trying too hard to make herself valuable. Instead, she just kept working. On the 6th day, Martha sent her to gather eggs from the chicken coop behind the barn. Evelyn had just filled her basket when she heard voices, male, coming from around the corner of the building. Ain't right, is all I'm saying. What ain't right? That was Thomas. The whole situation. Boss paid good money for a wife, got saddled with the wrong woman entirely. She didn't choose this, Frank. Don't matter. She's here under false pretenses. Eating our food, taking up space. A pause. She's plain as mud, too. Can't imagine the boss wanting to keep her even if he could. Evelyn froze, hand on the coop door. Thomas said something sharp in response, but the words were lost under the roaring in her ears. Plain as mud. She'd heard worse. Heard it her whole life, actually. But somehow, standing here with a basket of eggs in this place that wasn't home, those words cut deeper than they should have. She waited until the voices faded, then walked back to the kitchen on shaking legs. That night, alone in the guest room, she finally let herself cry. Quietly, into her pillow, where no one would hear. Not because of Frank's words, really. She'd known she was playing. But because everything was catching up with her, the shock of being traded for her sister, the wagon ride into nowhere, this ranch full of strangers, Rhett's cold disappointment, the endless uncertainty of not knowing what would happen next. She cried until she had nothing left, then washed her face and went to bed with eyes swollen and heart bruised. Tomorrow, she would get up and work again, would keep surviving. because that's all she knew how to do. Jeremiah returned on the 8th day. Evelyn was in the kitchen peeling potatoes when she heard the wagon pull up outside. Her hands went still, knife hovering over the half-peeled potato. Martha touched her shoulder gently. "Whatever happens, you'll manage." Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. Through the window, she watched Jeremiah climb down from the wagon and approach Rhett, who'd come out of the barn. They spoke briefly. Jeremiah handed over what looked like a letter. Rhett read it there in the yard, his face unreadable. Then he crumpled the paper in his fist and walked toward the house. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. She heard him come through the front door, heard his boots on the floor, heard him pause, probably seeing her through the kitchen doorway. "Miss Mercer, my office, now." It wasn't a request. She set down the knife and potato with trembling hands, wiped her palms on her apron, and followed him. In his office, he gestured to the chair without looking at her. She sat. Rhett moved behind his desk but didn't sit. Instead, he stood there, the crumpled letter in one hand, staring at it like it personally offended him. "Your father," he said finally, voice tight with controlled anger, "has declined to return my money. He also declines to send your sister. According to him, a bride was delivered as promised. The contract is fulfilled." Evelyn's breath caught. "Furthermore," Rhett continued, "he suggests that if I'm dissatisfied with the arrangement, I'm welcome to send you back at my own expense. Though he notes," he glanced at the letter, "Evelyn has always been difficult and ungrateful, so I cannot guarantee she'll be welcome." The words landed like blows. Difficult. Ungrateful. "I see," she whispered. Rhett finally looked at her. "Do you?" "My father doesn't want me back, never did." Her voice was steady despite everything. "I told you, I came here because the alternative was worse. Now there's no alternative at all. So what am I supposed to do with you?" The question hung in the air between them. Evelyn straightened her spine, lifted her chin. "You have options, Mr. Dalton. You can send me away, though, as my father pointed out, I have nowhere to go. You can keep me here as a servant, or—" She took a breath. "Or you can honor the marriage contract, not because I'm what you wanted, but because I'm what you got." His eyes narrowed. "You're suggesting I marry you." "I'm suggesting you make the best of a bad situation." She held his gaze. "I'll never be my sister. I'll never be beautiful or charming or any of the things you probably wanted in a wife. But I can work. I can learn. I won't complain or cause trouble. And I'll do my best to be useful." "Useful," he repeated, tone unreadable. "Yes." He studied her for a long moment, and she couldn't tell what he was thinking. His face was granite, giving away nothing. "I paid $500 for a bride," he said finally. "That money's gone. Your father made that clear." "I know." "So if I send you away, I'm out $500 and still don't have a wife." "Yes." "And if I keep you as a servant, I still don't have a wife, just another mouth to feed." Evelyn said nothing. Let him work through it. "But if I marry you—" He moved around the desk, leaned against it, arms crossed. "Then at least I get something for my money, even if it's not what I paid for." The words should have hurt, and they did, a little, but they were also honest. "Yes," she said. Silence stretched out. Outside, someone was hammering something, the normal sounds of a working ranch. "I don't love you," Rhett said bluntly. "Won't pretend otherwise." "I don't love you either," Evelyn replied. "That's not what this would be." "No, it'd be a business arrangement. You'd keep house, help Martha, manage what needs managing. In exchange, you'd have a home, a name, security. And you'd have a wife to fulfill whatever social obligations require one." His mouth twitched. Might have been the ghost of a smile. "Practical." "I'm nothing if not practical, Mr. Dalton." He pushed off the desk, walked to the window again, seemed to be his habit when thinking. Evelyn waited, barely breathing. When he finally turned back, his expression was resigned. "We'll do it tomorrow," he said. "There's a circuit preacher comes through monthly. He's due this afternoon. I'll ask him to stay over and perform the ceremony in the morning." Evelyn's heart skipped. "Tomorrow?" "No point dragging it out. If we're doing this, we're doing it." His gaze sharpened. "But understand, this is a practical arrangement. I'll provide for you, treat you fairly. But I won't lie and say this is what I wanted. I understand. Do you? He moved closer, and she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Because once we're married, you're stuck here, with me, with this life. No running back home if it gets hard. I have no home to run back to, she reminded him. You're all I have now. Something crossed his face. Pity, maybe. Or discomfort. Then we have an understanding, he said. Tomorrow morning, you'll be my wife. Tonight, he paused. Tonight, pack whatever Martha's given you. You'll move into the main bedroom after the ceremony. Heat flooded her cheeks. Yes, of course. He nodded once, dismissing her. She stood on shaking legs and made it to the door before his voice stopped her. Evelyn, she turned. He'd used her first name for the first time. I'll keep my part of this bargain, he said. I expect you to keep yours. I will. Then we'll make it work. It wasn't a promise, wasn't even particularly warm, but it was something. She went back to the kitchen, where Martha took one look at her face and poured her a cup of tea without asking. Well? The older woman asked. We're getting married, Evelyn said. Tomorrow morning. Martha nodded, unsurprised. Sensible solution. Is it? More sensible than the alternatives. Martha studied her. You scared? Terrified. That's honest, at least. Martha patted her hand. Rhett Dalton's a good man. Hard, but good. You could do worse. Evelyn thought about her father, who'd sold her like cattle. About Celeste, who hadn't even tried to stop him. About the life she'd left behind where she'd never mattered to anyone. Yes, she agreed quietly. I could do worse. That night, she lay awake in the guest room one last time, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she would marry a man who didn't love her, who saw her as a business arrangement, a practical solution to a financial loss. But she would also have a name, a home, a purpose. It was more than she'd had a week ago. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. Eat. The ceremony was brief and awkward. The circuit preacher, a jovial man named Reverend Matthews, who seemed oblivious to the tension, performed it in the front room of the ranch house. Martha stood as witness, along with Thomas and Pete. The other ranch hands had been given the morning off and made themselves scarce, probably uncomfortable with the whole situation. Evelyn wore the gray dress. It seemed appropriate, practical, and unremarkable, just like this wedding. Rhett wore clean work clothes and looked like he was about to undergo a medical procedure rather than a marriage. They spoke their vows in flat, steady voices. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Rhett gave her the briefest possible kiss, more of a formality than anything else. Congratulations, Reverend Matthews boomed. May your union be blessed with health and happiness. Martha had prepared a small meal, her idea of a wedding breakfast, though no one seemed particularly hungry. They ate in near silence while the Reverend chattered about other couples he'd married, apparently not noticing that this one was dying of awkwardness. When he finally left, heading to the next ranch on his circuit, the house felt too quiet. Well, Martha said, clearing dishes. That's done then. Rhett stood abruptly. I've got work to do. He looked at Evelyn, his wife now, legally. Martha will help you move your things to the main bedroom. Then he left, letting the door slam behind him. Evelyn sat there, married and abandoned, within an hour. Don't take it personal, Martha said gently. He just needs time to adjust. He's had 8 days to adjust. Still not enough, apparently. Martha squeezed her shoulder. Come on, let's get you settled. The main bedroom was on the second floor, across the hall from the guest room. It was larger, with a real bed frame and a wardrobe and a window that looked out over the back pastures. Masculine but not unwelcoming. Evelyn's few belongings, the clothes Martha had given her, looked pathetic in that big wardrobe. He'll come around, Martha said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. Just give him space when he needs it, and don't push. After Martha left, Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, her marital bed, and tried to process the fact that she was now Mrs. Rhett Dalton, a wife. Though her husband was currently somewhere out on the ranch, probably avoiding her. She spent the rest of the day helping Martha, keeping busy, not thinking about the fact that night would eventually come, and she would have to face Rhett in their shared bedroom. But when night did come, Rhett didn't. She waited, sitting on the bed in her nightgown, borrowed from Martha like everything else she owned. Waited as the house grew quiet. Waited until she was sure he wasn't coming. Finally, she climbed under the covers alone and stared at the dark ceiling. This was her wedding night, and she was spending it exactly as she'd spent every other night since arriving at Black Hollow Ranch. Alone. Somewhere in the house, a door opened and closed. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. She held her breath, listening. The footsteps passed the bedroom and continued down the hall. He was sleeping in the guest room. Evelyn pressed her hand over her mouth, not sure if she wanted to laugh or cry. She'd known this wasn't a love match, had agreed to a practical arrangement, but apparently Rhett Dalton couldn't even bear to share a room with her. That night, lying alone in a bed meant for two, Evelyn finally understood the true depth of her situation. She was married to a man who couldn't stand the sight of her, trapped on a ranch hundreds of miles from anywhere, unwanted by her family, disappointing to her husband, invisible to everyone else. She'd promised herself she wouldn't break. Now she just had to figure out how to keep that promise. Morning came whether Evelyn was ready for it or not. She woke alone in the big bed, sunlight already streaming through the window, and for a confused moment couldn't remember where she was. Then it all crashed back, the wedding, the empty night, her husband sleeping in another room, Mrs. Rhett Dalton. That's who she was now, though you wouldn't know it by looking at her life. She dressed quickly in one of the borrowed dresses and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was already bustling, Martha at the stove, several ranch hands gulping down coffee and grabbing biscuits on their way out to work. Thomas caught her eye and gave her an awkward nod. "Morning, Mrs. Dalton." The title sounded strange, foreign. "Morning, Thomas." He fled like his boots were on fire. Martha handed her a cup of coffee without comment, but her eyes were knowing. "Boss left before dawn. Said he'd be checking the north fence line all day." Of course he had. Evelyn took the coffee and tried not to feel the weight of what that meant. Her husband couldn't even face breakfast with her the morning after their wedding. "What needs doing?" she asked Martha, because work was easier than thinking. "Everything," Martha said dryly, "same as always." So Evelyn worked. She helped prepare meals, hauled water, scrubbed pots until her hands were raw. Kept herself busy enough that she didn't have time to dwell on the fact that she was in a marriage that wasn't really a marriage at all. The ranch hands were awkward around her now. Before, she'd just been the woman who might leave at any moment. Now she was the boss's wife, which apparently made everything more complicated. They called her Mrs. Dalton and stepped out of her way, and generally acted like she might shatter if they looked at her wrong. It was exhausting. Rhett didn't come back for lunch. Didn't appear for dinner either. "He does this sometimes," Martha said when Evelyn tried not to obviously watch the door. "Gets focused on work and forgets to eat. I'll send Thomas out with a plate." That night, Evelyn waited in the bedroom again, listening for footsteps that never came in her direction. When she finally accepted he wasn't coming, she blew out the lamp and lay in the darkness, staring at nothing. This was her life now. This strange half-marriage where she had a husband's name but not his presence, where she slept alone and ate alone and existed in this weird limbo of being married but not really mattering. She'd thought being unwanted by her family was hard. Turned out being unwanted by her husband was worse. The pattern continued for 3 more days. Rhett avoided her like she carried plague. He left before she woke, worked until after dark, and slept in the guest room. The few times their paths crossed, in the hallway, in the yard, he nodded curtly and kept moving. On the 4th morning after the wedding, Evelyn had enough. She found him in the barn at dawn, saddling his horse. He froze when he saw her, hand still on the saddle. "Mr. Dalton," she said. "It's Rhett." His voice was gruff. "We're married. You can use my name." "Can I?" She stepped closer, and he tensed. "Because from where I'm standing, we might as well be strangers." His jaw tightened. "I've been busy." "You've been hiding." "I don't hide." "Then what do you call sleeping in a different room than your wife?" The word wife seemed to hit him physically. He turned back to his horse, jerking the saddle strap tighter than necessary. "I call it giving you space." "I don't need space. I need—" She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. Need what? He still wasn't looking at her. "I need to know what I'm supposed to be here," she said finally. "Am I your wife? Your housekeeper? A guest who overstayed her welcome? Because right now I feel like I'm nothing at all." Rhett's hand stilled on the leather. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he turned slowly, and the expression on his face was complicated. Anger, frustration, and something that might have been guilt. "You want honesty?" he asked. "Please." "I don't know what you're supposed to be either." The admission seemed to cost him. "I didn't plan for this. Any of this. I paid for a wife, expected someone specific, and got someone else entirely," she finished. "Yes, we've established that. It's not just that." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "You're not what I wanted, but you're also not nothing. You work hard. The men respect you. Martha likes you. You don't complain or make trouble. But every time I look at you, I'm reminded that I made a mistake." His honesty was brutal. "That I trusted the wrong man and got played for a fool. And I know that's not your fault, but it doesn't change how it feels." The words hurt. She'd known they would, but hearing them said out loud was different than imagining them. "So what do we do?" she asked quietly. "I don't know." He leaned against the stall door, looking suddenly tired. "This is new territory for me, too." A horse whinnied somewhere deeper in the barn. Outside, the ranch was waking up, men calling to each other, animals stirring, another day beginning. "I can't keep living like this," Evelyn said. "Wondering where I stand, waiting for you to decide if you can tolerate my existence." "I don't—" He stopped, grimaced. "That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it?" He didn't answer. Evelyn took a breath, steadying herself. "Here's what I know. We're married. Legally, permanently. Neither of us can change that. So we can either make the best of it, or we can make each other miserable for the rest of our lives." "And making the best of it looks like what exactly?" "It looks like you actually talking to me occasionally. It looks like you sleeping in the same room as me, even if it's just for appearances. It looks like treating me like a person instead of a mistake you're stuck with." Rhett studied her for a long moment. In the dim barn light, his face was hard to read. "You're tougher than you look," he said finally. "I've had to be." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite warmth, but maybe the beginning of respect. "All right," he said. "You want me to treat you like a wife? I'll treat you like a wife, but you need to understand something." "What?" "This ranch comes first. Always has, always will. The work doesn't stop because we're having personal issues. So if I'm distant or distracted or not giving you the attention you think you deserve, it's because I've got 500 head of cattle and a dozen men depending on me to keep this place running." "I'm not asking for attention," Evelyn said. "I'm asking for basic acknowledgement that I exist." "Fair enough." He pushed off the stall door, walked past her toward the barn entrance. "I'll sleep in the bedroom tonight. We'll eat meals together when time allows. And I'll try to be less of a bastard about this whole situation. It wasn't romantic, wasn't even particularly kind, but it was something." "Thank you," she said. He paused at the door, looked back at her. "Don't thank me yet. You might find living with me is worse than living around me." Then he was gone, leaving Evelyn standing in the barn with the horses and the hay and the faint hope that maybe, this impossible situation could become bearable. That evening, Rhett actually appeared for dinner, sat at the head of the table while the ranch hands ate and talked, and when the meal was done, he didn't immediately disappear. "Walk with me," he said to Evelyn. It wasn't quite a request, but it wasn't quite an order either. They walked out past the main buildings as the sun set, painting the plains in shades of orange and red. Rhett didn't say anything for a long time, just walked with his hands in his pockets, looking out at his land. "My father built this place from nothing," he said eventually. "Came out here with a wagon and a dream and not much else. Broke his back turning this dirt into something worth having." Evelyn stayed quiet, sensing he needed to talk. "He died when I was 22. Left me everything. The land, the cattle, the debts. I've spent the last 13 years building on what he started." He glanced at her. "This ranch is everything to me. It's all I have." "I understand. Do you?" He stopped walking, turned to face her. "Because I need you to understand that I didn't want a wife for romance or companionship. I wanted a wife because this place needs one. Someone to manage the house, handle the social obligations, eventually raise children to pass all this to." "A business partner," Evelyn said. "Exactly." He seemed relieved she understood. So if you're expecting me to suddenly develop feelings or start acting like we're in some kind of love story, you're going to be disappointed. I'm not expecting that. She met his gaze steadily. I told you from the beginning, I'm practical. I know what this is. Then we're clear. Crystal clear. They walked back toward the house in silence. At the door, Rhett paused. I meant what I said earlier. I'll try to be less of a bastard. And I'll try not to expect too much. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. That's probably wise. That night, Rhett actually came to the bedroom. Evelyn was already under the covers when he entered, and the awkwardness was thick enough to choke on. He undressed to his undershirt and drawers without looking at her, climbed into the far side of the bed, and turned his back. Good night, he said to the wall. Good night, Evelyn whispered. She lay there in the darkness, acutely aware of him. The sound of his breathing, the warmth of another body in the bed, the strange intimacy of sharing space with someone who was technically her husband but felt like a stranger. It took hours to fall asleep, but at least she wasn't alone. The next morning, Rhett was already up and dressed when Evelyn woke. He glanced at her briefly. Martha needs help with the washing today. Storm's coming tomorrow, so get everything on the line while you can. Then he left. Not warm exactly, but present, acknowledging her existence. It was progress. Over the following days, Evelyn fell into a new routine, one that included Rhett in small, careful ways. They ate breakfast together, usually in silence, but together. He slept in their bedroom, keeping to his side of the bed like there was an invisible wall down the middle. Sometimes he told her about work that needed doing or issues with the cattle or problems with the ranch hands. It wasn't intimacy, but it was communication. The ranch hands noticed the change, stopped looking so uncomfortable around her, started treating her more like the boss's wife and less like an awkward house guest. Martha noticed too. You two figuring it out? She asked one afternoon while they were preserving vegetables. I don't know about figuring it out, Evelyn said, scraping carrots. But we're not actively making each other miserable anymore. That's something. Martha dumped chopped onions into a jar. Rhett's not an easy man. Too much time alone, too much responsibility. He forgets how to be around people sometimes. Were his parents like that? His father was harder than a rock and twice as stubborn. His mother... Martha paused, something sad crossing her face. His mother was gentle, kind. She died when Rhett was 15. Fever took her in 3 days. That's terrible. Changed him, Martha said. He was a softer boy before that. After she died, he closed up, threw himself into ranch work and never really came back out. Evelyn thought about the hard, distant man she'd married, tried to imagine him soft, couldn't quite manage it. He loved her a lot, Martha continued. She was the heart of this place. When she died, the heart went with her. Is that why he wanted a wife? To bring that back? Maybe. Martha sealed a jar with more force than necessary. Or maybe he just wanted what every man wants, someone to come home to, someone who makes the house feel less empty. That evening, Evelyn watched Rhett across the dinner table, saw the way he hunched over his plate, the permanent furrow between his brows, the walls he'd built so high around himself. A man who'd lost his mother and never learned how to let anyone close again. She understood that in a way. She'd built her own walls. Had to, growing up in a house where love was conditional and affection went to someone else. Maybe that's why this strange arrangement could work. Two damaged people who didn't expect much from each other, who understood that sometimes survival mattered more than happiness. Later that week, Evelyn was in the kitchen when Thomas burst through the door, face flushed. Mrs. Dalton, we've got a problem. She set down the bread dough she'd been kneading. What kind of problem? One of the mares is in trouble, foaling, but something's wrong. Boss sent me to fetch you. Me? Why me? He said... Thomas looked uncomfortable. He said you're good with animals, and Doc Harrison's 2 days away treating sick cattle at the Morrison place. Evelyn's heart kicked up. I'm not a veterinarian, Thomas. No, ma'am, but you're all we've got right now. She wiped her hands on her apron, mind racing. She'd helped with births back home, mostly smaller animals, but she knew the basics. Knew when something was positioned wrong. Knew what normal looked like and what didn't. Show me, she said. They ran to the barn where several ranch hands were gathered outside a stall. Rhett was inside with the mare, a beautiful chestnut who was down on her side, breathing hard, eyes rolling with pain. The foal's breech, Rhett said without looking up. I can feel it, can't get it turned. Evelyn climbed into the stall, knelt in the hay beside him. The mare's coat was dark with sweat. How long's she been laboring? 3 hours, maybe 4? Rhett's voice was tight with worry. She's exhausted. Evelyn ran her hands over the mare's distended belly, feeling. The mare flinched but didn't fight. Easy, girl, Evelyn murmured. We're going to help you. She looked at Rhett. I need you to hold her head. Keep her calm. He moved to the mare's head without question, stroking her neck, talking to her in a low voice. Evelyn had seen her father do this once, years ago, had watched him work carefully, patiently. She tried to remember everything he'd done. This is going to be uncomfortable for her, she warned. She might fight. Do what you need to do. Evelyn took a breath and reached inside the mare, feeling for the foal. There, legs folded wrong, head turned back. No wonder it was stuck. Working as gently as she could, she tried to manipulate the foal into position. The mare groaned and tried to rise. Hold her, Evelyn said. Rhett used his weight to keep the mare down, still talking to her, his voice surprisingly gentle. It took 20 minutes of careful work, sweat pouring down Evelyn's face, her arms aching from the effort. But finally, she felt the foal shift, slide into the right position. There, she breathed. That's it. Come on, Mama. You can do this now. The mare seemed to understand. On the next contraction, the foal began to emerge properly. One more push and a wet, gangly-legged colt slid into the hay. The mare immediately turned to her baby, nickering softly. Evelyn sat back, arms shaking, covered in blood and fluid and hay. You did it, Rhett said, staring at her. We did it. She managed a tired smile. How's the colt? The foal was already trying to stand, legs wobbly but strong. The mare licked him clean, maternal instinct taking over. He's perfect, Thomas said from the stall door, grinning. Mrs. Dalton, that was incredible. The other ranch hands were murmuring agreement, looking at her with new respect. Rhett helped her stand. Her legs were trembling from adrenaline crash. You knew what to do, he said, studying her face. I've seen it done. Didn't know if I could actually do it myself. But you tried anyway. What else was I going to do? Let her die? Something changed in his expression, softened, just slightly. Come on, he said. Let's get you cleaned up. He walked her to the house, one hand on her lower back, the first time he touched her voluntarily since their wedding kiss. Inside, he heated water while she scrubbed the worst of the mess off her hands and arms. Where'd you learn that? He asked, handing her a towel. My father. Before he sold most of our animals, we had horses. I used to help him. She dried her hands. He wasn't always the way he was at the end. There was a time when he actually cared about things. What changed? My mother died. He started drinking, gambling, lost most of what we had. She folded the towel carefully. Celeste became his whole world. I became useful until I wasn't even that. Rhett was quiet for a moment. Sorry. She looked up, surprised. For what? For comparing you to her, your sister. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. I've been so focused on what I didn't get that I haven't paid attention to what I did get. A bargain basement bride? His mouth twitched. A woman who can birth a foal when needed, who works without complaining, who doesn't run when things get hard. He met her eyes. That's worth more than a pretty face. It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd given her. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me. You earned it. That night, when they climbed into bed, the invisible wall between them seemed a little less solid. Rhett didn't turn his back immediately. Instead, he lay on his side looking at her. You did good today, he said. So did you. The way you calmed that mare, I couldn't have done it without you. We made a decent team. Yeah, Evelyn said. We did. His hand moved across the blanket, stopped inches from hers. Didn't quite touch, but didn't pull away either. Good night, Evelyn. Good night, Rhett. She fell asleep that night feeling something she hadn't felt since arriving at Black Hollow Ranch. Hope. The next few weeks brought a shift in the household. subtle but real. Rhett started actually talking to her, not just instructions or logistics, but actual conversation. He told her about the ranch, the cattle business, his plans for expansion, asked her opinion on things, and sometimes even took her advice. The men noticed, started coming to her with issues they'd normally take to Rhett: a sick cow, a broken fence, questions about supplies. She handled what she could and brought him the rest, and slowly they became something like a team. One evening, Pete approached her while she was hanging laundry. "Mrs. Dalton, got a question." "What is it, Pete?" "We're planning the fall gather, wondering if you'd want to help with the cooking. We'll be out on the range for 4 or 5 days. Could use someone who knows their way around a camp kitchen." Evelyn paused, clothespin in hand. "Does Rhett know you're asking me this?" "It was his idea, ma'am." Something warm bloomed in her chest. "Then yes, I'd be happy to help." Pete grinned. "Excellent. Fair warning, though. Cowboys on a cattle drive eat like locusts. Hope you're ready." That night, she mentioned it to Rhett. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," he said. "The men can manage." "I want to." She sat on the edge of the bed, watching him pull off his boots. "I want to see more of the ranch. Understand what you do out there." He glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "It's hard work, long days. You'll be cooking over an open fire in all weather." "I can handle it." "I know you can." He set his boots aside. "That's why I suggested it." The cattle gather started 3 days later. Evelyn rode out with the men in a supply wagon, her stomach fluttering with nervousness and excitement. It was the first time she'd left the immediate ranch area since arriving months ago. The plains stretched endlessly in every direction. Big sky, bigger land. It was harsh and beautiful and completely unforgiving. They set up camp near a creek, and Evelyn threw herself into the work, cooking massive meals over an open fire, keeping coffee going constantly, managing supplies. The men worked from before dawn until after dark, gathering cattle, checking brands, moving the herd. Rhett was everywhere at once, on horseback, checking fences, directing men, handling problems. She watched him in his element and understood for the first time why this place meant so much to him. Out here, he made sense. The hardness, the focus, the intensity, it all fit. On the third night, after everyone else had gone to sleep, Rhett found her sitting by the dying fire. "You should rest," he said, lowering himself to the ground beside her. "Can't sleep yet. Too much to think about." "Like what?" "Like how different everything looks out here. How big it all is." She poked at the embers with a stick. "I spent my whole life in one small town. This is overwhelming, freeing," she said. "Nobody here cares about what I look like or who my sister is. I'm just the cook. Just someone doing a job." "You're more than that." She looked at him, surprised by the softness in his voice. "You're my wife," he continued, staring into the fire. "The men respect you. They trust you. That matters out here." "Does it matter to you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "It's starting to." The admission hung between them, fragile and honest. "I know I haven't been—" He stopped, struggled. "I haven't been fair to you, holding on to what I thought I wanted instead of seeing what I actually have. You're allowed to be disappointed. I'm not anymore." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "Disappointed, I mean. You're nothing like I expected, but that's not necessarily a bad thing." Evelyn's heart was beating too fast. "What changed?" "You did. Or maybe I did. I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair. "All I know is somewhere between the wedding and now, you stopped being the wrong sister and started being just you. And I like you, as a person." It was the most open he'd ever been with her. "I like you too," she said quietly. "Even when you're being difficult." His mouth quirked. "I'm always difficult." "I know. I'm getting used to it." They sat there by the fire, shoulders almost touching, and for the first time since she'd climbed into that wagon months ago, Evelyn felt like she might actually belong somewhere. The last day of the gather brought a storm. It rolled in fast, turning the sky black, bringing wind that bent the grass flat. The men scrambled to secure the cattle while Evelyn fought to keep the camp from blowing away. "Get in the wagon!" Rhett shouted over the wind. "This is going to be bad." But before she could move, she heard it, a panicked bawling from near the creek. She ran toward the sound and found 3 calves trapped on the wrong side of a fence that had partially collapsed, the rising creek water threatening to sweep them away. Without thinking, Evelyn waded into the water. It was shockingly cold, deeper than she expected. The current pulled at her skirts. "What the hell are you doing?" Red appeared beside her, grabbing her arm. "The calves. They'll drown." "You'll drown! Get back to camp! Not without them!" She pulled free and kept going. She saw the moment he realized she wasn't going to listen, saw him make a choice. Then he was beside her, working with her, both of them fighting the water and the wind to get those terrified calves to safety. By the time they got all 3 animals back to the herd, they were both soaked to the bone, covered in mud, and the storm was fully upon them. They ran for the wagon, climbed inside, and huddled under canvas as rain hammered down. "You're insane," Rhett said, water streaming down his face. "They needed help. You could have been killed." "But I wasn't." She was shivering violently, adrenaline draining away. He stared at her for a long moment, then did something completely unexpected. He laughed. Actually laughed. A real, genuine sound she'd never heard from him before. "What's funny?" she asked. "You. Running into a flash flood to save cattle." He was still grinning. "You've been here 3 months. Most people don't develop that kind of loyalty to animals in 3 years. They're your animals, your livelihood." "Our animals," he corrected. "Our livelihood." The word "our" did something to her chest. They rode back to the ranch the next day, tired and dirty and satisfied. The gather had been successful, cattle accounted for, new calves marked, everything ready for winter. That night, back in their bedroom, Rhett didn't keep to his side of the bed. He rolled toward her, propped on one elbow, and looked down at her face. "I need to tell you something," he said. Her heart stuttered. "What?" "When you ran into that water yesterday." He paused. "I was terrified. Actually terrified. Because the thought of you getting hurt." Another pause. "It mattered more than it should have." "Rhett, let me finish." His hand came up, brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I married you out of stubbornness. Because I'd paid for a wife and didn't want to admit I'd been cheated. But somewhere along the way you stopped being an obligation and started being someone I actually care about." Tears pricked her eyes. "I care about you too. I'm not good at this," he continued. "At feelings, relationships, any of it. I'll probably mess it up more times than I get it right. I don't need you to be perfect." "Good. Because I'm not." He leaned closer. "But I'd like to try. To be a real husband, if you're willing." "I'm willing." He kissed her then, nothing like the brief formal kiss at their wedding. This was real, tentative and careful and searching. When he pulled back, his eyes were soft in the lamplight. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to." "I want to," she said, and meant it. The weeks after that kiss changed everything and nothing at all. Rhett didn't suddenly become soft or romantic. He still woke before dawn, still worked until his body demanded rest, still forgot to eat when he was focused on a problem. But now when he came home, he looked for her, asked about her day, listened when she talked. And at night, he reached for her in the darkness. Not always for passion, though that came too, awkward and tender and learning, but sometimes just to hold her, as if he needed proof she was real. Evelyn found herself settling into this life in ways she'd never imagined possible. The ranch wasn't just Rhett's anymore. It was hers, too. The men came to her with questions, respected her decisions, treated her like she belonged. Martha had stopped hovering protectively and started leaving her to run things on her own. Even the land itself felt different, less harsh, more like home. It was early November when the black stallion arrived. Evelyn was hanging laundry when she heard the commotion, men shouting, hooves thundering, something slamming against wood. She dropped the sheet she'd been pinning and ran toward the largest corral. A crowd of ranch hands surrounded it, watching something inside. She pushed through and felt her breath catch. The horse was magnificent and terrifying, pure black, easily 16 hands, with wild eyes, and a coat that rippled over muscles built for violence. He was throwing himself against the fence rails hard enough to make the whole structure shake. "Where did he come from?" she asked Thomas, who stood beside her looking worried. "Boss bought him off the man passing through. Got him cheap because nobody can handle him. Thomas shook his head. Been through 4 owners already. Each one tried to break him and each one gave up, or got hurt trying. What's Rhett planning to do with him? Break him properly. Says a horse like that is worth a fortune if you can get him trained. Evelyn watched the stallion rear up, hooves slashing the air. There was something desperate in the way he fought. Not mean, frightened. He's scared, she said. He's dangerous, Pete corrected, walking up behind them. Boss is going to work with him this afternoon. Should be interesting. Interesting wasn't the word Evelyn would have chosen. Terrifying seemed more accurate. She found Rhett in the barn, checking saddles. Thomas told me about the horse, she said. Shadow. Rhett didn't look up. That's what the last owner called him, though I don't think the name stuck. Horse doesn't respond to anything. Are you really going to try to break him yourself? Someone has to. He selected a rope, tested its strength. Can't have a 1,000-pound animal tearing up my corral forever. Rhett, I know what he looks like. Now he did look at her, and his expression was set. I've broken difficult horses before. Not like that one. Probably not, he admitted, but I can't justify the expense if I don't at least try. She wanted to argue, but knew it wouldn't help. Rhett had made up his mind. That afternoon, half the ranch gathered to watch. Evelyn stood at the fence, stomach tight with anxiety, as Rhett entered the corral. Shadow immediately charged him. Rhett dodged, moving with practiced ease, but it was close. Too close. The stallion wheeled and charged again, and this time Rhett had to vault over the fence rail to avoid being trampled. Maybe try a different approach, boss, Thomas called nervously. Rhett climbed back in, rope in hand. For the next hour, Evelyn watched him try every technique she'd ever seen for gentling a horse. Approach and retreat, standing calm until the horse settled, offering feed. Nothing worked. Shadow fought like his life depended on it, and maybe in his mind it did. Finally, Rhett emerged from the corral, breathing hard, shirt dark with sweat. He's not ready, was all he said before walking away. The next day, Rhett tried again, and the day after that. Each session ended the same way, with Shadow terrified and Rhett frustrated. On the 4th day, Evelyn couldn't watch anymore. You're scaring him, she said when Rhett came out of the corral, a new bruise forming on his shoulder where Shadow had caught him with a glancing blow. I'm trying to train him. You're trying to dominate him. There's a difference. Rhett's jaw tightened. You have a better idea? Let me try. The words were out before she'd fully thought them through. Around them, several ranch hands stopped what they were doing. Absolutely not, Rhett said flatly. Why not? Because he's dangerous. He nearly broke my shoulder today, and I know what I'm doing. So do I. Evelyn, I helped birth that foal. I calmed that mare when she was panicking. I know horses, Rhett. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. And I know what it's like to be treated like something that needs to be broken. Something flickered across his face. Understanding, maybe. If he hurts you, then he hurts me. But he won't. She wasn't actually sure of that, but she said it anyway. Just let me try, please. He studied her for a long moment, clearly torn between protecting her and respecting her. Finally, he exhaled roughly. 1 session. If it's not working, you stop. Deal. The next morning, Evelyn entered the corral alone. Behind her, she could feel Rhett watching, tense as a coiled spring, ready to jump in at the first sign of trouble. Shadow was at the far end, already agitated by her presence. She stood still, not approaching, not even looking directly at him, just breathing, being. The stallion snorted, pawing the ground. Evelyn sat down in the dirt. What is she doing? She heard Pete whisper. I don't know, Rhett said, voice tight. She stayed sitting for 20 minutes. Half an hour. 45 minutes. Shadow gradually stopped pacing, though he kept his distance, watching her with those wild, white-rimmed eyes. Finally, Evelyn started talking. Not loud, barely above a murmur. She told Shadow about the wagon ride that brought her here, about being unwanted, about learning to survive in a place that didn't want her. I know you're scared, she said softly. I know every person who's handled you has hurt you or tried to force you into something you didn't want to be. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to sit here. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, you can come to me. She stayed in that corral for 3 hours, didn't move except to shift when her legs cramped, didn't push or demand or expect, and slowly, impossibly, Shadow's head lowered. His ears, which had been pinned flat, relaxed slightly. When Evelyn finally stood to leave, moving slowly and deliberately, the stallion took one step toward her, just one. But it was something. "That's enough for today," she said to him. "I'll come back tomorrow." Outside the corral, Rhett was staring at her like she'd performed magic. "He moved toward you." "Barely. That's more than he's done for anyone else." He touched her arm. "How did you know that would work?" "I didn't." She brushed dirt off her skirt. "I just knew force wasn't working, so I tried the opposite." Over the next 2 weeks, Evelyn spent hours with Shadow. Sometimes she sat in silence, sometimes she talked, sometimes she brought apples and left them in the dirt, not offering them directly, just leaving them there. The stallion slowly, carefully began to trust. The day he finally ate an apple from her hand, the entire ranch seemed to hold its breath. Thomas actually gasped. "I'll be damned," Pete muttered. But Rhett just smiled, small and proud, and when Evelyn emerged from the corral, he pulled her into his arms right there in front of everyone. "You're something else," he said into her hair. "He's the special one, not me. No, you." He pulled back to look at her. "Most people see a dangerous animal and want to break it. You saw a scared one and wanted to heal it." By mid-November, Shadow was letting Evelyn touch his neck, his flank, letting her stand close without bolting. The men watched in amazement as the savage horse that had terrorized 4 previous owners followed Evelyn around the corral like a puppy. "She's got a gift," Martha said one evening while they were preparing dinner. "With animals, I mean. They trust her. She's patient," Rhett said from where he sat reading a ledger. "That's all it is." "That's not all it is," Martha corrected. "Plenty of patient people in the world. But Evelyn understands fear. That's different." Evelyn kept her eyes on the potatoes she was peeling, but warmth spread through her chest. Late that night, in bed, Rhett rolled over and pulled her close. "Martha's right, you know," he said into the darkness. "You do understand fear. Everyone understands fear. Not like you." His hand traced patterns on her shoulder. "You've spent your whole life being afraid, haven't you? Of not being good enough, not being wanted, not mattering." She didn't answer, didn't need to. "I spent my whole life being afraid too," he continued quietly. "After my mother died, I was terrified of losing anything else I cared about. So I just stopped caring about anything except this ranch. And now I'm terrified again." He tightened his hold on her. "Because I care about you. More than I plan to, more than I know what to do with." Evelyn turned in his arms, found his face in the darkness. "I'm not going anywhere. You promise?" "I promise." He kissed her then, deep and desperate, and she understood that this hard, closed-off man had somehow let her all the way in. December brought the first real snow. Not much, just enough to dust the plains white and make everything beautiful and strange. Evelyn stood at the kitchen window watching it fall, marveling at how different the world looked. "First snow here?" Martha asked, kneading bread dough. "First snow anywhere in years. We didn't get much where I grew up." "Well, get used to it. Winter out here doesn't mess around." Martha was right. The temperature dropped steadily over the next week, and the work of keeping the ranch running became harder. Cattle needed extra feed. Water troughs froze overnight. The men worked in shifts to keep everything managed. Evelyn found new ways to help, making sure coffee was always hot, preparing extra food for the men working late, heating water for washing up when they came in half frozen. One particularly bitter night, Rhett came in late, hands so cold he could barely unbuckle his coat. "Here." Evelyn led him to the kitchen, pushed him into a chair, and wrapped his hands in warm towels. "You don't have to—" "Hush. Let me do this." He watched her fuss over him, something soft in his expression. "You're good at taking care of people." "I've had practice." "With who? Your family never took care of you." "Exactly. So I learned to take care of myself. And once you know how to do that, taking care of others is easy." His hands had warmed enough to move. He caught one of hers, brought it to his lips. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," she said, smiling, "but you're stuck with me anyway." That night, lying in bed while wind howled outside, Rhett told her about his plans for the ranch. Expansion into new territory, breeding better cattle, building a reputation that would last generations. I want this place to mean something, he said, to be something my children can be proud of. It was the first time he'd mentioned children. Evelyn's heart skipped. Our children, she corrected quietly. He pulled her closer. Yeah, ours. They fell asleep like that, wrapped together against the cold, and Evelyn thought maybe, just maybe, she'd found something she'd stopped believing existed, a place where she mattered. Christmas came and went with quiet celebration. Martha made a special meal, and the men gathered in the main house to eat and share stories. It was warm and loud and chaotic, and Evelyn loved every minute of it. Rhett gave her a gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal. For writing down your thoughts, he said, almost shy, or recipes, or whatever you want. She gave him new work gloves, practical and warm, and he kissed her in front of everyone without hesitation. The men hooted and hollered, and even Martha smiled. January was brutal, bitter cold and relentless wind. But the ranch survived, and so did they. Evelyn had been at Black Hollow for 6 months now, and it felt like a lifetime, like she'd always been here. She was in Shadow's corral on a bright, freezing afternoon when it happened. The stallion had been making incredible progress. He let her touch him freely now, even tolerated a lead rope for short periods. She'd been working with him for over an hour, and he was calm, steady. That's when she tried something new. Moving slowly, she positioned herself alongside his shoulder, one hand on his back. Then, in one smooth movement, she pulled herself up, onto his back. Shadow froze. Easy, she murmured. Easy, boy. You're all right. For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the stallion took one careful step forward, then another. Evelyn's heart was racing, but she kept her voice calm, kept her body relaxed. Shadow walked slowly around the corral, Evelyn on his back, and she felt tears prick her eyes. Look at you, she whispered. Look at what you can do. A noise made her glance toward the fence. Rhett stood there, watching, and his face was full of something she couldn't quite name. Pride. Awe. Maybe even love. After she'd slid off Shadow's back and left the corral, Rhett didn't say anything, just pulled her against him and held her tight enough to hurt. What? She asked, muffled against his chest. I'm watching you become someone this ranch can't live without, he said roughly. And I'm realizing I can't live without you either. She pulled back to look at him. Rhett, I love you. The words came out hard, like he was fighting them. I didn't mean to, didn't plan on it, but I do. Evelyn's chest felt too full. I love you too. Even though I'm difficult and closed off and not romantic? Because you're those things. And also in spite of them. She touched his face. You're exactly what I need. He kissed her there in the middle of the ranch yard with the winter sun beating down and ranch hands pretending not to watch. When they finally broke apart, Pete was grinning openly. About damn time, boss, he called. Rhett didn't even look embarrassed, just kept his arm around Evelyn and led her back to the house. That night felt different. Rhett made love to her like she was precious, like she mattered more than anything, and afterward he held her close and told her all the things he'd been too afraid to say before. How she'd changed him, made him better, given him hope for a future that was more than just work and survival. You're the heart of this place now, he whispered, the way my mother used to be. You make everything better just by being here. Evelyn fell asleep feeling complete in a way she'd never experienced before. She should have known it couldn't last. The letter arrived 3 days later. Jeremiah brought it, back from town with supplies and mail. He handed it to Rhett with an apologetic expression that made Evelyn's stomach drop. Rhett read it standing in the front yard, his face going progressively harder with each line. When he finished, he crumpled the paper in his fist. What is it? Evelyn asked, though part of her already knew. Your father. His voice was flat. He's demanding additional payment. Says he sent the wrong daughter by accident and deserves compensation for the loss of Celeste's services. Evelyn's blood went cold. He what? He wants another $200. Says if I don't pay, he'll... Rhett stopped, jaw working. He'll what? He'll report that I refused to honor the original contract and have the marriage annulled. The world tilted. Can he do that? Legally? Maybe. He'd have to prove fraud on my part, which he can't, But he could make trouble, drag us through courts, ruin our reputation. Rhett looked at her, and his eyes were filled with barely contained rage. I'm sorry, this is my fault for ever dealing with him. This isn't your fault. It's his. Evelyn's hands were shaking. He's trying to extort you. Well, he's not getting a damn cent. Rhett strode toward the house. I'll write back and tell him exactly where he can shove his demands. But 3 days after Rhett sent his response, another letter arrived. This one wasn't from her father. It was from Celeste. Evelyn recognized her sister's handwriting on the envelope. Her heart stuttered as she opened it, and what she read made her feel sick. Dearest Evie, I hope this letter finds you well. I've been thinking about you so much lately and feeling terribly guilty about how things transpired. Father has told me about your situation, and I simply cannot bear the thought of you trapped in a marriage that was meant for me. I'm writing to let you know that I'm coming to visit. Father has agreed to accompany me, and we should arrive within the fortnight. I want to see the ranch and meet your husband and make sure you're being treated well. Father mentioned that Mr. Dalton seemed quite disappointed when you arrived instead of me. I do hope he's grown to accept the situation, though I imagine it must be difficult for him. For both of you. I'll see you soon. All my love, Celeste. Evelyn read it 3 times, each reading making her feel worse. That evening, she showed it to Rhett. He read it in silence, then set it down carefully on the table. Too carefully. When? Was all he said. Within 2 weeks. And your father's coming too? Yes. Rhett stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening plains. This is about the money. He's not satisfied with my refusal, so he's bringing her here to remind me what I supposedly missed out on. Maybe. Evelyn's throat was tight. Or maybe Celeste actually wants to see me. He turned, and the look on his face said he didn't believe that for a second. She wants to see what you have, what was supposed to be hers. You don't know that, don't I? He moved back to the table, picked up the letter again. Listen to how she writes. The marriage that was meant for me. Mr. Dalton seemed quite disappointed. She's planting seeds, Evelyn, reminding you that you're second choice. I know I'm second choice. The words hurt to say. I've always known that. That's not... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. You're not second choice. Not anymore, not to me. But I was, and now the first choice is coming here to see what she gave up. The fear that had been lurking at the edges of her happiness suddenly rushed in. Celeste was beautiful, charming. Everything Evelyn wasn't, and yes, Rhett loved her now. But what would happen when he saw what he could have had? That night in bed, Rhett pulled her close. I don't want her here, he said into the darkness. We don't have a choice. We could leave, take a trip, be gone when they arrive, and have them think we're running? I don't care what they think. I do. She rolled over to face him. I need to see her, Rhett. Need to face this. Why? Because she's haunted me my whole life, and if I run now, she always will. He didn't like it. She could see that in the set of his jaw. But he nodded. Then we'll face it together, he said. But I need you to know something. What? Whatever happens, whatever she says or does, it doesn't change how I feel about you. You're my wife. The only wife I want. You say that now. I'll say it then too. He cupped her face. I love you, Evelyn. Not because you're here, not because you're convenient, but because you're you. And no one, not your sister, not your father, not anyone, can change that. She wanted to believe him, desperately wanted to. But as she lay awake long after Rhett fell asleep, all she could think was that in 2 weeks, her perfect life was about to be tested. And she wasn't sure it would survive. The days leading up to Celeste's arrival were tense. Rhett threw himself into work with almost manic intensity. Evelyn cleaned the house until it gleamed, prepared the guest rooms, tried to keep busy enough that she couldn't think. Martha watched it all with worried eyes. You know she can't take him from you, the older woman said one afternoon. Can't she? Evelyn scrubbed a pot harder than necessary. She's everything I'm not. She's everything you're not, Martha agreed, which is exactly why she can't compete. Rhett doesn't want beautiful and charming. He wants real. He wants you. Evelyn wanted to believe it, but the old fears were back, whispering that she wasn't enough, had never been enough, would never be enough. The night before they were due to arrive, Rhett found her in Shadow's corral. She was leaning against the stallion's neck, drawing comfort from his solid warmth. Hiding? Rhett asked, climbing over the fence. Preparing. He moved to stand beside her, hand resting on Shadow's back. This horse is proof of what you can do, you know. What do you mean? Everyone said he was untrainable, broken beyond fixing. But you saw something different, saw past what everyone else saw. He turned to look at her. That's what you've done for me too, seen past the hard exterior to something worth saving. You were never broken. I was, he said quietly. Just in different ways. And you fixed me anyway. Evelyn's eyes burned with tears. What if she's everything you wanted? What if seeing her makes you realize what you gave up? Then I'll realize I gave up nothing. He pulled her into his arms, Shadow shifting slightly but tolerating their presence. Because what I have now is everything I never knew I needed. She pressed her face against his chest, breathing him in, leather and soap and the particular scent that was just him. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, so am I. Of what? Of you believing whatever poison she'll try to feed you. Of losing you because you can't see what I see. He tipped her face up. So I'm asking you now, before they get here. Trust me. Trust us. Trust that what we have is real. I'll try. That's all I'm asking. They stood there in the corral as the sun set, holding each other while Shadow stood guard, and Evelyn tried to gather enough courage for what was coming. Tomorrow, her past and her present would collide. And she had no idea which one would win. The wagon appeared on the horizon just after noon, a dark speck growing larger against the winter sky. Evelyn watched from the kitchen window, her hands gripping the edge of the counter so hard her knuckles went white. They're here, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Behind her, Martha stopped chopping vegetables. Rhett, who'd been sitting at the table pretending to review ledgers, stood and moved to stand beside Evelyn. Remember what I said, he told her quietly. Trust us. She nodded, not trusting her voice. As the wagon drew closer, Evelyn could make out two figures, her father driving, Celeste beside him, in a deep blue traveling dress that probably cost more than everything Evelyn owned combined. Even from a distance, her sister looked perfect. Golden hair arranged in careful curls, posture straight and elegant. Everything Evelyn had never been. I should go greet them, Rhett said, but his hand found Evelyn's first, squeezed once. Then he was out the door, striding across the yard with that confident walk of his. Evelyn stayed at the window, watching. Saw her father climb down first, looking older than she remembered, but still carrying that air of superiority. Saw Celeste accept Rhett's hand as she descended from the wagon. Saw her smile up at him. That practiced, devastating smile that had charmed everyone back home. Saw the way she let her hand linger in Rhett's just a moment too long. Here we go, Martha muttered. Steel yourself, girl. Evelyn forced herself away from the window, smoothed her plain brown dress, and waited. They came through the door in a rush of cold air and expensive perfume. Celeste swept into the kitchen like she owned it, and her eyes landed on Evelyn with an expression that managed to be both warm and pitying. Evie! She crossed the room and pulled Evelyn into a hug that smelled like rose water and felt like a performance. Oh, look at you. You've gotten so thin. And your hands, are those calluses? Evelyn pulled back. It's good to see you too, Celeste. Her father stood in the doorway, surveying the kitchen with obvious disdain. His eyes barely touched Evelyn before moving on, dismissing her as always. Mr. Mercer, Rhett said, and his voice had gone cold and formal. I received your letter demanding additional payment. My answer remains no. William Mercer's face hardened. We'll discuss that later. First, I'd like to see what my daughter's gotten herself into. The way he said my daughter made it clear he meant Celeste, not Evelyn. Of course. Rhett's jaw was tight. Martha will show you to the guest rooms. Dinner's at 6. Martha led them upstairs, and the moment they were gone, Evelyn sagged against the counter. That was worse than I imagined, she said. That was nothing. Rhett moved close, tilted her chin up. And you handled it perfectly. I didn't do anything. Exactly. You didn't let her rattle you, didn't give your father the satisfaction of seeing you scared. He kissed her forehead. Just keep doing that. But it was hard to maintain composure when Celeste reappeared an hour later, having changed into an even more beautiful dress. emerald green silk that made her eyes look impossibly blue. She found Evelyn in the kitchen helping Martha with dinner preparations. "Can we talk?" Celeste asked, all sweetness. "Just the two of us? I've missed you so much." Martha's eyes met Evelyn's, a clear warning, but Evelyn nodded. "Of course." They walked out to the front porch. The sun was starting to set, painting everything gold and orange. Celeste leaned against the railing, looking out at the ranch with an expression Evelyn couldn't quite read. "This is quite a place," Celeste said, "bigger than I expected. It's a working ranch, takes a lot of land. And a lot of work, from what I can see." Celeste's gaze swept over Evelyn's worn dress, her work-roughened hands. "You look exhausted, Evie." "I'm fine. Are you?" Celeste turned to face her fully. "Because Father told me what happened. How you were sent here instead of me. How Mr. Dalton, Rhett, was expecting someone else entirely. That's not exactly... I felt terrible when I found out." Celeste reached for Evelyn's hand, and her touch was soft, perfectly manicured. "I had no idea Father was going to do that. If I'd known, I would have stopped him." It was said so sincerely that for a moment, Evelyn almost believed it. Almost forgot that Celeste had stood in their father's house and smiled as Evelyn was shoved into that wagon. "It's done now," Evelyn said, pulling her hand back. "And it's worked out fine." "Has it?" Celeste's expression was all concern. "Because I saw the way Rhett looked at me when we arrived. Like he was seeing what he was supposed to get, what he paid for." The words hit exactly where they were meant to. Evelyn felt them land in her chest like stones. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Celeste moved closer, lowered her voice. "Evie, I know you. You've always settled for less because you thought you didn't deserve more. But this, being trapped in a marriage with a man who wanted someone else, you don't have to accept that. I'm not trapped, aren't you? Hundreds of miles from home with nowhere else to go, married to a man who looks at you and sees a mistake?" Celeste's eyes were wide and earnest. "I'm worried about you. I came all this way because I wanted to make sure you were all right." "I'm more than all right. I'm happy." "You're pretending to be happy. There's a difference." Celeste sighed. "But I understand. You've always been good at making the best of bad situations." Before Evelyn could respond, the door opened and Rhett appeared. "Dinner's ready," he said, looking between them. "Everything all right out here?" "Perfect," Celeste said brightly. "Just catching up with my sister." At dinner, William Mercer dominated the conversation, holding forth about business dealings and town politics like anyone cared. Rhett responded with bare civility. Martha served in tight-lipped silence, and Celeste played the perfect guest, asking interested questions and laughing at the appropriate moments. Evelyn barely tasted her food. "So, Mr. Dalton," Celeste said during a lull in her father's monologue, "what made you decide you wanted a wife? A successful rancher like yourself, I imagine you had other options." Rhett's expression didn't change, but his hand found Evelyn's under the table. "I wanted a partner, someone who could handle ranch life, someone strong." "And did you get what you wanted?" The question seemed innocent, but Evelyn heard the edge beneath it. "I got exactly what I needed," Rhett said, squeezing Evelyn's hand, "which turned out to be better than what I wanted." William Mercer snorted. "Pretty words, but we both know the truth. You paid for one daughter and received another. That's breach of contract." "I paid for a bride," Rhett corrected, his voice hard. "And I received one. The contract's fulfilled. With the wrong woman. With my wife." Rhett's eyes were ice. "And I won't hear her disrespected at my own table." Silence fell like a hammer. William's face reddened, but before he could respond, Celeste jumped in. "Father, please, let's not argue." She smiled at Rhett. "I think it's wonderful that you and Evie have made the best of the situation. Really, I do." The words were perfect, supportive, kind, and they made Evelyn want to scream. After dinner, while Martha cleared the table and the men retreated to Rhett's office to discuss business, which Evelyn knew meant her father demanding money and Rhett refusing, Celeste cornered her again. "Can I see your room?" she asked. "I want to know where my sister's been living all these months." Evelyn wanted to refuse, but couldn't think of a reason that wouldn't sound suspicious, so she led Celeste upstairs to the bedroom she shared with Rhett. Celeste looked around slowly, taking in the simple furnishings, the lack of decoration, the worn quilt on the bed. "It's very practical," she said finally. "It's home." "Is it?" Celeste sat on the edge of the bed, ran her hand over the quilt. "Or is it just the place you're stuck?" "Why are you really here, Celeste?" "I told you. I wanted to make sure you were all right." "No." Evelyn crossed her arms. "You wanted to see what you gave up. You wanted to remind me that I'm second choice." Celeste's mask slipped just for a moment. Something cold flickered behind those blue eyes. "You've always been second choice, Evie. That's not my fault." "Maybe not, but you've always enjoyed it. That's not fair." "Isn't it?" Evelyn moved closer. "You stood there and watched Father shove me into that wagon. You smiled. You told me to have a nice trip like it was funny. I was young. I didn't understand." "You understood perfectly." Evelyn's voice was shaking now, but she didn't stop. "You've always understood that you were the favorite, the pretty one, the one everyone wanted, and you've used that my entire life to make me feel small." Celeste stood, her expression hardening. "If you feel small, that's on you, not me." "You're right about one thing, though," Evelyn said. "I did always settle for less, but not anymore. I have a husband who loves me, a home where I matter, and a life I've built with my own hands. And you showing up here in your expensive dresses, trying to plant doubts? It's not going to work. We'll see about that." Celeste moved toward the door, then paused. "You know what the sad thing is, Evie? You actually believe he loves you, but I saw the way he looked at me today, like he was waking up from a bad dream and finally seeing clearly." She left, and Evelyn stood there shaking, heart hammering against her ribs. That night, Rhett was late coming to bed. When he finally appeared, he looked exhausted and angry. "Your father's a piece of work," he said, pulling off his boots with more force than necessary. "Spent 2 hours telling me I owed him for damages, like you're damaged goods. Maybe I am." He stopped, looked at her sharply. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't let them get in your head." He moved to the bed, sat beside her. "That's what they want. To make you doubt yourself, doubt us. Celeste said you looked at her like you were seeing what you should have gotten. Celeste is a liar." His voice was flat. "I looked at her like I was looking at a stranger, because that's what she is. She's beautiful. So is a rattlesnake. Doesn't mean I want one in my house." He cupped her face. "I love you. Only you. When are you going to believe that?" "I'm trying." "Try harder." He kissed her, fierce and demanding. "Because I'm not giving you up. Not to them, not to anyone." They made love that night like they were fighting something, desperation and need and the fear of losing what they'd found. And afterward, wrapped in Rhett's arms, Evelyn tried to let his certainty be enough. But sleep was a long time coming. The next morning, Celeste was all smiles at breakfast, chattering about how she'd love to see the ranch, learn how everything worked. "Perhaps Rhett could show me around," she suggested, batting her eyelashes. "I'm sure Evelyn would be happy to," Rhett said, without missing a beat. "She knows this place better than anyone." Celeste's smile dimmed slightly. "Oh, I wouldn't want to take her away from her chores." "They can wait," Evelyn said, standing. "Let's go." She led Celeste on a tour of the ranch, pointing out buildings and explaining operations with barely concealed irritation. Celeste asked questions that sounded interested but felt mocking. "And you do all this work yourself? How exhausting." "It's fulfilling." "If you say so." Celeste watched some ranch hands working with cattle. "These men must think it's strange, the boss's wife doing manual labor." "They respect me." "I'm sure they do," but her tone suggested otherwise. They were walking past the corrals when Celeste spotted Shadow. The stallion was in the largest pen, and even from a distance his beauty was obvious. "What a gorgeous horse," Celeste breathed. "Can I see him closer?" "I don't think—" But Celeste was already moving toward the corral, and Evelyn had to follow or let her go alone. Shadow saw them coming and immediately tensed. He knew Evelyn, trusted her. But strangers made him nervous. "Careful," Evelyn warned. "He's not fully trained yet." "Oh, I'm good with horses." Celeste reached the fence, leaned on it. "Here, boy, come here." Shadow's ears went back. "Celeste, step back. He doesn't know you." "Don't be silly. Animals love me." She reached through the fence slats. "Come on, beautiful." Celeste, no! Shadow lunged at the fence, teeth bared, and Celeste shrieked and stumbled backward. She would have fallen if Evelyn hadn't caught her. I told you to be careful, Evelyn said. Celeste's face was white with shock and anger. That animal is dangerous. Someone should put it down before it kills someone. He's not dangerous. He's protective. Evelyn moved to the fence and Shadow immediately calmed, walking over to nuzzle her hand. He just knows who he can trust. The look Celeste gave her could have curdled milk. How talented you are, she said coldly. Taming wild things. I don't tame them. I earn their trust. There's a difference. They walked back to the house in silence, but Evelyn could feel Celeste's rage like heat coming off her skin. That afternoon, William Mercer announced he needed to speak with Evelyn privately. Red immediately objected, but Evelyn agreed, wanting to get it over with. They sat in the front room, her father in the good chair, Evelyn perched on the edge of the sofa. You've done well for yourself, William said, though his tone suggested the opposite. Better than I expected. Thank you. She kept her voice neutral. But we both know this isn't what Dalton wanted. He wanted Celeste. He has me. By accident. By fraud. Her father leaned forward. I'm prepared to offer a solution. Evelyn's stomach dropped. What kind of solution? Celeste is willing to take your place. She'll marry Dalton, fulfill the original contract. You can come home and we'll tell everyone the marriage was annulled due to incompatibility. For a moment, Evelyn couldn't breathe. You want me to give up my husband? He was never truly yours. You know that. William's expression was almost kind, which somehow made it worse. This is your chance to do the right thing. Let Celeste have what should have been hers. Stop living a lie. I'm not living a lie. I'm married. Legally. Legitimately. Marriages can be dissolved. Not this one. Evelyn stood, hands clenched at her sides. I'm not giving up my life because you and Celeste decided you want it. Think about what you're saying. You're choosing hardship and a man who doesn't love you over. He does love me. Her voice shook but held firm. And I love him. And no amount of manipulation from you or Celeste is going to change that. William's face darkened. You're being selfish, stubborn, just like your mother. Good. Evelyn moved toward the door. Because my mother was the only decent person in our family. She left him sitting there and found Rhett in the barn. He took one look at her face and pulled her into his arms. What did he say? She told him and felt him go rigid with fury. They want you to leave me. Yes. And you said? I said no, obviously. She pulled back to look at him. Rhett, I'm not going anywhere. You need to believe that. I do believe it, but I also know how they work. They'll keep pushing, keep trying to make you doubt. He gripped her shoulders. So I'm going to ask you directly. Do you want this life? This ranch? Me? More than anything. Then we end this now. He was already moving toward the house. I'm done being polite. He found William and Celeste in the parlor, clearly in the middle of their own discussion. They looked up when Rhett entered with Evelyn behind him. We need to talk, Rhett said, his voice hard. All of us. Rhett, if this is about the money, William started. It's not about money. It's about my wife. Rhett's hand found Evelyn's. You came here thinking you could undermine her, make her feel inadequate, convince her to give up. But it's not working. We're just concerned, Celeste began. You're concerned about yourselves, Rhett cut her off. You want access to my ranch, my money, my life. But you can't have it because I didn't marry you. I married Evelyn. By accident, William said. No, by fate. Rhett pulled Evelyn closer. And I'm grateful for it every damn day. Because your daughter, this daughter, is worth 10 of what you were trying to sell me. Celeste's face went red. How dare you? I dare because it's my house, and my wife you're disrespecting. Rhett's voice could have cut glass. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave, tomorrow morning, and you're not coming back. You can't throw us out, William blustered. I absolutely can. This is my land, and you're not welcome on it. We'll sue. We'll tell everyone how you stole my daughter. Tell whoever you want. Evelyn is legally my wife. The contract was fulfilled. You have no case. Rhett's smile was sharp. But please try it. I'd love to watch you explain to a judge why you committed fraud and are now attempting extortion. William's face went purple, but before he could respond, Celeste stood. This is ridiculous. She looked at Evelyn with something like hatred. You really think he means this? That he actually wants you? I know he does, Evelyn said quietly. Then you're a fool. Celeste moved closer. He's settling for you because you're convenient, because you're here. But sooner or later, he'll wake up and realize what he's missing. The only thing I'm missing is the peace I had before you arrived, Rhett said. Evelyn is everything I want. You're everything I don't. The words landed like a slap. Celeste's perfect composure cracked, revealing the ugly fury beneath. Fine, she grabbed her shawl. Keep your little ranch and your plain wife. I hope you're happy together. We will be, Evelyn said, once you're gone. William Mercer stood, gathering what remained of his dignity. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is ever trusting you in the first place, Rhett replied. Now get out of my house. They left in a flurry of angry footsteps and slammed doors. Evelyn heard them stomping around upstairs, packing their things, and felt a weight she'd been carrying for months begin to lift. Rhett pulled her into his arms, buried his face in her hair. I meant every word, he said. You know that, right? I know. I don't want her. I don't want anyone but you. I know, she repeated, and this time she truly believed it. That evening, while Celeste and William ate a tense dinner in cold silence, Rhett and Evelyn escaped to the barn. They sat in the hay, his arms around her, and watched the sun set through the open door. Tomorrow they'll be gone, he said. Yes. And then it'll just be us again. Us and the ranch and all the work that never ends, she said, smiling. Sounds perfect. She twisted in his arms to look at him. I'm sorry they came here, sorry they tried to ruin what we have. They didn't ruin anything. If anything, they proved how strong we are. He kissed her softly. You stood up to them, told them no. That took courage. I was terrified. So was I, terrified of losing you. His hand cupped her face. But you didn't break, you never do. I wanted to, when Celeste was saying all those things, planting all those doubts. I wanted to believe her, wanted to fall back into being that girl who never felt good enough. But you didn't. No, because you taught me I am good enough, more than good enough. She pressed her forehead to his. You gave me something to fight for. We gave each other something to fight for. They sat there until the stars came out, holding each other, and Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. A certainty she'd never had before. This was her home, her life, her husband. And nothing, not her father's greed or her sister's jealousy or her own old fears, could take it away. The next morning dawned cold and clear. William and Celeste loaded their bags into a wagon Rhett had arranged to take them to town. The farewell was brief and icy. I hope you know what you're giving up, Celeste said to Evelyn as a parting shot. I do, Evelyn replied. A family that never wanted me. It's the best trade I ever made. She stood with Rhett as the wagon pulled away, watching until it disappeared over the horizon. When it was finally gone, she felt him relax beside her. It's over, he said. It's over, she agreed. Martha appeared on the porch behind them. Good riddance to bad rubbish. Now come inside before you freeze. I made coffee. In the warm kitchen, surrounded by the smells of breakfast and the sounds of ranch hands gathering for the day, Evelyn felt something she'd been chasing her whole life finally settle into place. She was home, really home. And for the first time ever, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The days after Celeste and William left felt like the ranch could breathe again. Evelyn woke that first morning to find Rhett already up, standing at the window watching the sunrise paint the plains in shades of pink and gold. Couldn't sleep? She asked, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Didn't want to. He glanced back at her, and there was something lighter in his expression, something free. I kept thinking they'd still be here, that it was all a dream. It's real. They're gone. He moved to the bed, sat beside her. I need to tell you something. Her stomach tightened. What? When your sister was here, when she was trying so hard to make you feel small, he paused, searching for words. I saw what you must have lived with your whole life, the constant comparisons, the never being enough, and it made me furious. Rhett, let me finish. His hand found hers. It also made me realize that I did the same thing to you. Maybe not as obviously, maybe not as cruelly, but those first weeks I compared you to what I thought I wanted, made you feel like a consolation prize. You were honest. That's different. No. Honest would have been saying I was disappointed in your father's fraud. What I did was make you carry the weight of my disappointment like it was your fault. He lifted her hand, kissed her knuckles. I'm sorry. For all of it. Evelyn's throat tightened with emotion. You don't have to apologize. We both came into this damaged, both had to figure out how to build something real from a mess. And we did, didn't we? Yeah, she said softly. We did. He pulled her into his arms, and they sat there as morning light filled the room, holding each other in the quiet knowledge that whatever they'd been before, they were solid now. Later that week, Thomas approached Evelyn while she was working in the kitchen. Mrs. Dalton, got a question. What is it? Some of the men were wondering if you'd teach us to work with Shadow, the way you do. He looked embarrassed. We've all tried our hand at difficult horses before, but nothing like what you did with him. Thought maybe you could show us your method. Evelyn set down the bread dough she'd been kneading. My method is just patience, Thomas. It's more than that, ma'am. We all saw it. You have a gift. She glanced at Martha, who was smiling knowingly. I'd be happy to try, Evelyn said, but I'm not sure I can explain what I do. It's more feeling than technique. Then teach us the feeling, Thomas said earnestly. So she did. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn started working with the ranch hands, showing them how to approach nervous horses, how to read their body language, how to build trust instead of forcing submission. The men were surprisingly eager students, and she found she enjoyed teaching them. You're a natural at this, Rhett said one evening, watching her demonstrate something to Pete in the corral. Have you thought about making it official? Making what official? Training, offering it as a service. He leaned against the fence beside her. We could bring in horses from other ranches, charge for the work. You'd be doing what you're good at, and we'd be building another income stream. The idea thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. You really think people would pay for that? I know they would. Word's already spreading about what you did with Shadow. Had 2 different ranchers ask me about it last time I was in town. He smiled at her surprise. You're becoming known, Evelyn, as the woman who can gentle any horse. That's not true. I can't gentle any... Stop. He turned her to face him. Stop diminishing what you do. You have a talent. Own it. She thought about it as they walked back to the house, about having something that was truly hers, a skill people valued, a way to contribute that went beyond cooking and cleaning. All right, she said, let's try it. Within a month, they had their first client, a neighboring rancher with a mare that had become aggressive after a difficult foaling. Evelyn worked with the horse for 2 weeks, and by the end, the mare was calm and gentle again. The rancher paid well and told everyone he knew about it. More clients followed. By spring, Evelyn had a waiting list of horses that needed her touch. The ranch built an additional training corral specifically for her work, and Rhett hired an extra hand to help with the increased workload. You're running a business, Martha said proudly one afternoon while they prepared lunch for the workers. A real, successful business. It still doesn't feel real, Evelyn admitted, rolling out pie dough. 6 months ago, I was the unwanted daughter nobody cared about. Now I have ranchers traveling days to bring me their horses. That's because you stopped believing you were unwanted. Martha covered a pot of stew. You started believing you had value, and everyone else followed your lead. It was true. Somewhere between arriving at Black Hollow Ranch as a rejected substitute and now, Evelyn had transformed into someone who knew her worth, who demanded respect and received it, who built things instead of just surviving them. The change showed in small ways. The way she carried herself, shoulders back, chin up. The way she spoke, clear and confident instead of apologetic. The way the ranch hands listened when she had something to say. How townspeople greeted her respectfully when she accompanied Rhett to the general store. But the biggest change was internal. She'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Stopped expecting to wake up and discover it was all a mistake. One warm April evening, Rhett found her in Shadow's corral. The stallion was fully trained now, rideable, responsive, a completely different animal than the terrified creature who'd arrived months ago. Evelyn was brushing his coat, and Shadow stood perfectly still, eyes half closed in contentment. He'd do anything for you, Rhett observed, climbing into the corral. We trust each other. That's all. That's everything. Rhett moved close enough that Shadow could inspect him, then ran a hand down the horse's neck. I've been thinking. About? About how this ranch used to feel before you came. Cold. Empty. Like I was just going through motions. He looked at her over Shadow's back. And how it feels now. Alive. You're getting sentimental in your old age, she teased. I'm serious. He moved around the horse to stand in front of her. You didn't just become part of this place, Evelyn. You became the heart of it. The men work harder because they respect you. The horses respond better because you handle them. Even the damn chickens lay more eggs since you started tending them. Now I know you're exaggerating. I'm not. His hands cupped her face. I'm trying to tell you that you matter here. Not because you're my wife or because you work hard, but because you're you, and this place needs you. Her eyes stung with tears. I need it too, need you. I know, that's what makes us work. He kissed her softly. We're not two halves making a whole. We're two broken pieces that fit together anyway. It wasn't poetic. Wasn't the kind of romantic declaration people wrote songs about, but it was real and honest and more meaningful than any pretty words could be. That night in bed, Rhett pulled her close and said quietly, I want to build something with you, something that lasts beyond us. Like what? A legacy, children, eventually. A ranch that means something to the community. He paused. A family that's nothing like the one you came from. Family. The word used to make her flinch. Now it made her hopeful. I'd like that, she whispered. Yeah? Yeah. They lay in the darkness, planning futures and dreaming possibilities, and Evelyn realized she'd stopped thinking about what she'd lost when her father threw her away. She only thought about what she'd gained. Summer brought its own challenges. A drought threatened the water supply, and they had to dig deeper wells. Several cattle got sick, and Evelyn worked alongside Rhett and the hands nursing them back to health. The work was brutal and endless, but they handled it together. One scorching July afternoon, a stranger rode up to the ranch. A young woman, maybe 20, with a black eye and clothes that had seen better days. She slid off her horse and approached Evelyn, who was hanging laundry. Are you Mrs. Dalton? The woman asked. I am. Can I help you? I hope so. The woman's voice shook. My name's Sarah, my husband, my ex-husband. He's been following me. I ran as far as I could, and someone in town said that you'd understand. Evelyn saw herself in this woman, saw the fear, the desperation, the nowhere else to go hopelessness. Come inside, she said without hesitation. Let's get you fed and cleaned up. Then we'll figure out what to do. Sarah stayed for 3 days. In that time, Evelyn learned her story. Married too young to a man who turned violent, no family to help her, running with nothing but the clothes on her back. I don't know where to go, Sarah said over dinner the second night. I can't go back, but I don't know how to move forward. You start by surviving, Evelyn told her. One day at a time. Then you figure out what you're good at and build from there. That's what you did? In a way. Evelyn glanced at Rhett, who was listening quietly. I came here as someone nobody wanted, had to figure out how to become someone people needed. And you did it by working with horses? By working with everything. Horses, kitchen, ranch, by proving I belonged. She reached across the table, squeezed Sarah's hand. You'll find your thing, too. They helped Sarah get to the next town, where she had a distant cousin, gave her money for supplies and clothes, made sure she had a plan and resources to start over. After she left, Rhett found Evelyn on the porch, staring out at the sunset. You gave her hope, he said. Could see it in her face when she rode away. I gave her what someone should have given me, a chance. You had to fight for your chance, make it yourself. I know. But that doesn't mean everyone should have to fight that hard. She leaned against him. We have enough here. Enough space, enough resources, enough stability. Maybe we could help more people like her. You want to start taking in strays? Not strays, people who need a second chance. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. You know that means more work, more complications, more mouths to feed. I know. And you want to do it anyway. I do. He kissed the top of her head. Then we'll do it. Over the next year, Black Hollow Ranch became known as a place where people could go when they had nowhere else. They hired 2 women running from bad situations as kitchen help, took in a young man who'd been thrown out by his family and taught him ranch work, gave temporary shelter to a widow and her 3 children until they could get back on their feet. Not everyone stayed, most moved on once they were stable, but all of them left stronger than they'd arrived. And the ranch grew stronger too. The extra hands meant they could expand operations. The women in the kitchen started a small baking business, selling bread and pies in town. The young man turned out to have a talent for woodwork and started making furniture they could sell. Black Hollow became more than just a ranch. It became a community. One evening in late fall, almost 2 years after Evelyn had first arrived, she stood in the yard watching the sun set. The ranch bustled around her, people working, laughing, living. Shadow grazed peacefully in his corral. Smoke rose from the kitchen chimney where Martha and the other women were preparing dinner. Rhett came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different everything is from when I got here." "Better or worse?" "Better. So much better." She leaned back against him. "I came here believing I was worthless, that I'd always be second choice, always be the one nobody wanted. And now? Now I know that's not true. Maybe I was second choice for you initially. Maybe my family never wanted me. But I was exactly the right choice for this place. For this life." She turned in his arms. "I was the right choice for me. You were the right choice for all of us," he said. "This ranch, these people, me, we're all better because you're here. We made each other better. That's how it works." He kissed her, and around them the ranch carried on its evening routines. Someone called out a question about the cattle. A woman laughed in the kitchen. A horse whinnied softly, the sounds of home. That night at dinner, the long table was full. Ranch hands, kitchen workers, a family staying temporarily, Martha at the far end keeping order. It was loud and chaotic and imperfect. Rhett raised his glass. "I want to propose a toast." The table quieted. 2 years ago, this ranch was just land and cattle and work. Now it's something more. A home. A community. A place where people come broken and leave whole. He looked at Evelyn. "And we have one person to thank for that transformation. My wife." "Rhett, I didn't—" "Yes, you did." He smiled at her. "You took a place that had forgotten how to be warm and reminded it. Took people who'd forgotten their worth and helped them find it again, starting with yourself." Glasses raised around the table. Thomas stood. "To Mrs. Dalton, who taught us that strength isn't about force, it's about patience and trust." Pete stood next. "To the woman who sees potential where others see problems." One by one, people stood and offered their own toasts. By the end, Evelyn was crying openly, and she didn't care who saw. After dinner, she and Rhett walked out under the stars. The plains stretched endlessly around them, dark and vast and beautiful. "I need to tell you something," Rhett said. "What?" "I'm grateful for your father's fraud." She laughed through her tears. "That's a strange thing to be grateful for." "Maybe, but if he'd sent Celeste like he was supposed to, I'd have gotten exactly what I thought I wanted. Someone decorative and charming who'd have made my life easier." He pulled her close. "Instead, I got someone who made my life better, who challenged me, changed me, built something real with me. You think Celeste couldn't have done that? I know she couldn't, because it takes someone who's survived being unwanted to recognize others who feel the same. It takes someone who's had to fight for their place to help others fight for theirs." He tilted her face up. "It takes you. We did it together." "Yeah," he agreed. "We did." They stood there holding each other under stars that seemed close enough to touch, and Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought her here, the wagon ride that had felt like the end of everything, the cold reception, the loneliness, the slow, painful process of building trust with a man who didn't want her. All of it had led to this moment, this ranch, this life, this love. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd refused?" Rhett asked. "If you'd told Jeremiah there was a mistake and demanded to go back?" "Sometimes, but not often." She looked up at him. "Because I think I knew, even then, that going back would mean staying small forever. At least here, I had a chance to become something more." "And you did. You became everything. Winter came again, fierce and unforgiving. But the ranch was prepared. They had enough supplies, enough feed, enough hands to manage the work. And when the worst of the storms hit, they gathered around the fire in the main house and told stories and played games and reminded each other that spring would come eventually. On Christmas Eve, Evelyn stood in the kitchen, helping Martha prepare tomorrow's feast. Through the window, she could see Rhett working with some of the men to secure the barn against another incoming storm. "You look happy," Martha observed. "I am happy." "Good. You've earned it." Martha wiped her hands on her apron. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course. When you first arrived, I thought you'd run within a month. You looked so scared, so beaten down." She smiled. "Didn't account for how stubborn you were, how strong." "I didn't feel strong. Strong people rarely do. They just keep going anyway." Martha pulled a pie from the oven. "That's what you did. Kept going. And look what you built." Evelyn looked around the warm kitchen, heard laughter from the other room where some of the women were decorating, felt the solid presence of the life she'd created. "It's not perfect," she said. "Nothing ever is. But it's mine, ours. That's all that matters." That night, lying in bed with Rhett, Evelyn felt a wave of gratitude so strong it almost hurt. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For giving me a chance, for seeing past your disappointment to who I actually was." "You gave me a chance too," he countered. "Could have given up on me when I was being a bastard. Could have believed you weren't worth fighting for. We both took risks. And they paid off." He pulled her closer. "I love you, Evelyn Dalton. Every stubborn, strong, impossible inch of you. I love you too, even when you're difficult. Especially when I'm difficult." She laughed, and he kissed her, and outside the wind howled, but inside they were warm and safe and together. Spring arrived with wildflowers and new calves, and the kind of fresh start that only comes after surviving something hard. The ranch thrived. Evelyn's horse training business was booming. The extra workers had integrated seamlessly into the operation. One afternoon in late April, Evelyn was working with a particularly nervous mare when Rhett appeared at the corral fence. "Got news," he said. She looked up. "Good or bad? Depends on perspective." He climbed into the corral. "Ran into someone from your old town. He mentioned that your father died 3 months ago." Gambling debts finally caught up with him. Evelyn's hand stilled on the mare's neck. She waited for feeling, grief, relief, something. But all she felt was a distant sadness for the man her father could have been if he'd made different choices. And Celeste? Married some merchant's son. Apparently she's miserable but well-dressed. Evelyn almost smiled. "That sounds about right." "You all right?" "Yeah." She was surprised to realize it was true. "He stopped being my father a long time ago, and Celeste made her choices. I made mine." "No regrets?" She looked around the ranch at the people working together, the horses grazing peacefully, the man standing beside her who'd become everything she needed. "None," she said firmly. "Not a single one." That evening they sat on the porch watching the sunset. It had become their ritual, ending each day together, talking about what had happened and what was coming. "I'm proud of you," Rhett said suddenly. "For what?" "For everything, for surviving what they did to you, for building this life anyway, for becoming someone who helps others do the same." "I'm proud of us," she corrected, "for building this together." "Together," he agreed. "Always." As darkness fell and stars began appearing, Evelyn thought about the girl she'd been 2 years ago. Scared, unwanted, convinced she'd never matter to anyone. That girl was gone. She'd been replaced by a woman who knew her worth, who built things instead of just surviving them, who understood that being chosen second didn't mean being chosen wrong. Sometimes it meant being chosen right in ways nobody expected. The ranch settled into its evening quiet around them. Somewhere, someone started playing a fiddle. The sound drifted across the yard, sweet and lonely and hopeful all at once. "You know what the best part is?" Evelyn asked. "Tell me." "I spent my whole life trying to be chosen, trying to be good enough, pretty enough, valuable enough that someone would want me." She looked at him. "And then I came here and learned something better." "What's that?" "That I didn't need to be chosen. I needed to choose myself." She took his hand. Everything else followed from that. Rhett squeezed her hand. "You chose yourself. And you chose me. And you chose this life. Best choices you ever made." "Best choices we ever made," she said. because that was the truth of it. They'd both been broken in different ways. Both had walls built so high they seemed impossible to scale. Both had believed they were safer alone. And then they'd chosen to try anyway. To trust anyway. To build something real from the wreckage of what should have been. It hadn't been easy, hadn't been smooth or perfect or anything like a fairy tale, but it had been real, and it had been worth it. Evelyn leaned her head on Rhett's shoulder, felt his arm come around her, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Not because someone else had decided she was good enough, but because she decided it herself. And that made all the difference. The fiddle music continued playing into the night, a song about new beginnings and second chances, and the kind of love that doesn't announce itself with trumpets, but builds slowly, carefully, one day at a time. On the plains around them, the wind whispered through the grass like it was telling secrets. The stars above burned bright and eternal. And in the warm circle of Rhett's arms, Evelyn felt something settle deep in her bones. Peace. Not the fragile kind that shatters at the first sign of trouble, but the solid, unshakable kind that comes from knowing who you are and what you're worth and where you belong. She was Evelyn Dalton, wife, horse trainer, builder of second chances. Not the unwanted daughter anymore. Not the wrong sister. Not the mistake nobody asked for. Just herself. Finally, completely, gloriously herself. And that was more than enough. It was everything.